I'm Gene. Daddy was born in 1918 in Fannin County, Texas. He thought the doctor charged $40 to $50 for delivering babies. He loved to tell stories of the good old days. He wrote this: I was born before bathtubs, central heating, air conditioning, and cars with roll-up windows and door locks. Before ballpoint pens, paved roads, television, and credit cards. We had an outhouse. A windmill pumped water into a barrel. Mom and Dad carried water to the house. We bathed in a number 3 wash tub, once a week, if it wasn't too cold. My brother Reen was born in 1919. It was so cold in the winter, Mom would heat her smoothing irons, wrap them in a towel, and put them at the foot of the bed to keep our feet warm. In March 1922, we moved to Abernathy, Texas. Dad rode with all our belongings in a cattle car from Bonham, while Mom, Reen, and I rode the passenger train. I was 3 years old. Dad had built a 2-room house on the farm. He made a good crop in 1926, and so they built a little 4-room house. In 1933, many people were in soup lines, but we never had to go there. We always had plenty to eat. We butchered hogs and rendered lard. We had chickens, so we ate a lot of fried chicken. We had eggs and bacon or sausage with hot biscuits. And Mom always had a big garden. She canned veggies, jelly, and preserves. They sold eggs for 9 cents a dozen. Mom sold cream and butter. We farmed with 6 horses and mules. In 1934, we did not have enough feed, so we traded them for a new John Deere tractor with 2-row equipment. My daddy, J.B., liked to tell stories, but his life tells a story. He became a Christian when he was 16 and was baptized in the tank at home. He played football in high school, and his size made him a star player. But he did not play long because his heart was in farming. He and Reen were busy farming as young boys. One year they hoed cotton and were paid 25 cents a day. The men got 50 cents a day. He could build and fix anything, like his grandfather Cox. He met a young girl, 12 years old, in County Line named Edna Elizabeth Redwine. They lived a mile or so from each other. Her brothers would not let her ride their bike, but he would let her ride his. He liked her and knew she was special. A couple of years later, he bet a friend a movie ticket that he could take her home one evening. With permission from her brother, he did, and then went back to his friend and collected his ticket and said, "I'm going to marry that girl one day." Daddy told stories of how he chased her all over Texas and New Mexico. When the Redwines moved to Fort Sumner, he would go see her and help them pick apples. A few years later, when Mother was almost 17, they finally got permission to marry. They went the next morning to the pastor's house with Freck, Howard Gray, and a friend to stand with them. On March 21, 1938, at 10 o'clock in the morning, Mother and Daddy were married. After lunch with Mom's parents, Daddy went to work till evening. He earned $10 a week, working 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. A year and some months later, I was born. They paid the doctor a bushel of grapes and a bushel of apples. When I was about 3 weeks old, we moved back to County Line, where Daddy farmed with Granddaddy Sneed for several years.
In 1940, Daddy got land in Littleville and built a 12 by 24 house. It had 2 rooms, but even there, our doors were always open to people needing a place to stay. As anyone can remember, that's the way it was, and always has been. On February the 25th, 1941, Aunt Betty was born. Then August the 19th, on Jeannie's 3rd birthday, Carol Lynette was born. Daddy took us on vacations every year. We'd usually drive up to Colorado and go on fishing trips. The back of the car was fixed so there would be suitcases laid flat like a big bed. Sometimes we'd just go for a drive through a few states. I have memories of fishing with him. Carol and Daddy were always the dog lovers, and when he accidentally ran over Judy, her dog, the 2 of them had a funeral for Judy. He was a good daddy and a good husband. He provided, he mentored, he taught us the value of family. He was a giver. He raised a big garden in the field and let people come get what they needed. He helped deliver groceries. He made sure people were taken care of. That was him. He was slow to anger, never got real upset, and very patient. One day they had ordered something. It was in a big box. He picked Mother up and put her in that box. We were so upset, thinking he was hurting Mother. Carol threatened to go tell the neighbors. From Littlefield we moved to Hereford around 1945 to 25 Mile Avenue. One memory that Daddy loved was our horse Sugar would come in the house. People would drive down the street and could see that horse in the door. We could use sugar cubes to coax Sugar out. Daddy got a kick out of that, and Mother was concerned for her floors. We moved to our house on Avenue D on my 12th birthday, a home Daddy and a few carpenters built. It was a bigger house, and this was our home we grew up in. We lived there until we all graduated and eventually all went to college. Daddy farmed many years in Hereford, had some good crops and some lost. We went to the First Baptist Church. All of us were baptized there, and Daddy became a deacon there. All of us eventually got married, and another era began in 1960, which began one of Daddy and Mother's greatest pleasures. That was the grandkids. There were 10 of them: Jay, Karen, Renee, Deborah, Mike, Susan, Carrie, Tracy, Brittany, and Brian. Daddy wanted more land to farm, and someone told him about Sunray. They built a house there and moved. They had some really good crops, and again some lost. But he kept on farming, and we were blessed. They loved their grandkids visiting in Sunray. Daddy was always even-keeled, never irritated, but if he was, you knew something was bad. He was fun, never a drinker, never a smoker, a good man that all looked up to, a role model to young and old, a leader, a teacher, a helper, and a rescuer, and a mentor, all of his life. Daddy taught the grandkids to ride horses and entered them in rodeo play days and rodeos. Daddy was involved in scoring of these play day rodeos and also got a chance to ride in some of them. Some of the grandkids took to horses more than others, but there is not one of them who doesn't have fond memories of PaPa and the little horse Booger Red. The house in Sunray was again always open, and especially to the grandkids to come live or stay a while. They had 7 of the grandkids come and stay at one time. Daddy put a tank in the back so they could swim in it. He loved to have fun with the grandkids, always placing their first and middle name in a little riddle and making it rhyme. He said he was a poet. He made a horse-drawn wagon to pull the grandkids in the parade. When not farming with the grandkids or family, Daddy and Mother loved to travel in their fifth-wheel travel trailer, going to the tip of Texas every year, sometimes even taking a few of the grandkids. In the middle 80s, Daddy was diagnosed with prostate cancer and spent some time in Houston battling it, which he did overcome. This led to his retirement. The last crop he had in Sunray, Jay helped plant. They planned to retire in Sunray until Jay, the first grandson, was diagnosed with a brain tumor and had married and moved to Brownfield. Daddy suggested they move to Lubbock so they could be close to him, and that's what they did. By this time, a new generation of great-grandchildren had started, another great pleasure. In 1982, they moved to Lubbock and built their last big house to make room for all these new ones, I'm sure. There were 23 great-grandchildren.
Daddy was a deacon at Bacon Heights Baptist Church, where they enjoyed their church and their friends. Once again, their house was open to whomever, grandkids, nieces, nephews, friends, and family. Some stayed for a meal, and some lived a while. Some needed Daddy to help fix something, work on a car, or maybe build something. Their house was always a revolving door of visitors. People loved to come visit. As they grew older, they moved to a smaller house in Lubbock where they lived until 2010. Daddy had lost a lot of his sight, and he could no longer drive. So they moved to Austin to live close to my brother Gene and his wife Marvine, and where they lived in assisted living. Still, of course, making close friends wherever they went, and Daddy's still the storyteller, making people laugh and making people feel loved. While the world around them got larger, their dwellings got smaller. They lost precious people to them, including grandson, great-granddaughter, brothers, sisters, in-laws, and friends. But great-great-grandchildren were born, and some not old enough to really know the dad or papa we all do, but they will learn about him and never stop hearing about what kind of man he was. Daddy had an incredible memory. He could remember dates and details of anything. Even in the last place where Daddy was, he told stories, of course, with all those details. He couldn't tell you enough. There were stories heard for the first time. It was like his whole life was flashing in front of him, and he wanted to make sure we all knew those things. Mother, his wife of 77 years, would walk in and he would say, "There she is, the love of my life." He'd make sure she knew she was loved, and they'd hug and kiss every time. Gene and he spent father-son time, and Gene would help him shave and make sure he had what he needed. He loved talking about family roots with Betty, and still loved hearing me laugh. He loved me singing to him favorite hymns and sometimes singing with me. He listened to his favorite gospel music, listened to the Bible, and he recited verses a lot as if making sure he was remembering. Seldom did he ask anyone to do anything for him, even when it was more difficult to do it himself. So having to rely on others was a change for him. He would tell the sweet staff how great they were. They all loved him. He made quite an impression on many hearts. He was so respectful and courteous, saying please and thank you and paying compliments even when it was hard to do, and his body was so tired. He was still so giving. One special nurse that really formed a bond with Daddy knew him for such a short time, but as it is so common for Daddy to do, impacted his life in such a big way. These are the words from the nurse. "I have read about all the great men of God, but now I don't need to anymore. I met that man. If you get to meet the author, you no longer need to read the book. I have cared for many people, but I have never seen something so rare. JB showed there is so no sting of death when your life is so deeply rooted in Jesus Christ that there is nothing to be afraid of, that heaven awaits, and that is glory. He told me when Jesus is ready to take him, that he is ready. But until then, as long as he is breathing, he guesses he still has a purpose. He is living witness of the verse, to live is Christ, to die is gain. Every minute he is here on earth, and until that last moment, he will live as Christ and teach us he's learned from Christ, understanding where he goes. He gains everything. I want to be just like him." He noticed Daddy was lying in bed and still not missing any opportunity to be a witness to teach his family, his roommates he had, or staff, or even strangers about Jesus, but knew he could do more than just talk by showing a great love and respect to everyone he came into contact with. He always walked the walk, even though he couldn't really walk. He always had the eyes to see need, even when he could not see. Although he responded right up to the end of his life, he was ready to go, and when he went silent on that last day, Jesus called him home. He fulfilled his purpose. I overheard someone say that learned of his passing, "I believe we just lost one of the greatest men on earth." To his family, he was the rock and leader. To friends, he was a great man. To everyone, he was a hero. But to God, we can be sure he was a good and faithful servant.